The question is that this bill be now read a second time. I give the call to the Minister.
Thank you,
Small
Mr.
business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise to speak on the Farm Household Support Amendment Bill 2017 and add to the contributions from many of my colleagues, including the member for Gippsland who just spoke, and the members for Murray, Mallee, Calare and others. It is an important bill, Mr. Speaker, and it seeks to change the definition of assets so that farmers who would otherwise have been ineligible for farm household support allowance are now able to access it, and that is so important for the farmers I represent, so important for the farmers that the member for Gippsland represents, and as well as the those salt of the earth cockies who the member for Edmonero, my colleague, my neighbouring colleague, and also the member for the minister at the table who represents that fine seat, that fine Victorian seat of Wannon. As outlined in the explanatory memorandum, Mr. Speaker, the Farm Household Support Amendment Bill will amend the Farm Household Support Act of 2014 to ensure that recipients of farm household allowance are not required to serve an ordinary waiting period or liquid assets waiting period before they can begin receiving the FHA. It also clarifies the asset test treatment of certain assets necessary for the operation of the farm enterprise. And as the member for Gippsland just enunciated, we want to give farmers a hand up, not a hand out, and that's what farmers want as well. They are those people who continue to produce food and fibre. They are doing it very well even in times of drought, Mr. Speaker. They act for and on our behalf and keep this nation fed and clothed, and full marks to them. Now, the FHA program gives farmers and their partners a maximum of 3 years income support to meet basic household needs while they make decisions about the future of their farm businesses and take action to improve their circumstances. And it is tough. Farming is very tough, and I would know. My father was a farmer. His father before him, and indeed his before him, and all farmed in the Junee Mara areas of the Riverina, and I represent a large part of New South Wales. It covers not just the Riverina but also now the Central West, those great areas of Parks and Forbes and Cowra, great wheat growing areas, cattle and sheep producing areas, and I'm not unfamiliar with the difficulties faced by farmers and the despair they find themselves in during difficult times, and that could be, as I mentioned before, times of drought. It could be times of floods, and certainly Forbes suffered from some dreadful droughts in recent months, floods in recent months, Mr. Speaker, and as well as pestilence, fires, floods. All those things really greatly affect the farmer income, and I know that during those times that farmers certainly need every bit of help. As I said, farmers work the land, they care for their animals, they put food on our tables. It's vital that the government provides support and assistance to help those out who look after and provide for us. And I'm the first to rebuke anyone who criticises farmers for complaining about the lack of rain or the price of grain, or for choosing to live where they do, often under very dire and very trying circumstances. Now, farmers aren't guaranteed a fixed income, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They are price takers, not price makers. And at the moment, prices are good. At the moment, prices are good, and and I commend the seasons for that. The seasons have been kind to us in recent years, but I also absolutely, pay credit to the Minister for Agriculture and Water Resources, the Deputy Prime Minister, Leader of the Nationals, for the work that he has done, setting the policy parameters and policy settings to ensure that farmers have the very best opportunity. And certainly with this legislation as well, Senator Anne Ruston as well for her work, and the chair of the Coalition's Backbench Committee, indeed, that being the member for Barker. And I was in the member for Barker's electorate just last week, in fact on my small business roadshow, and took the chance to talk to many of his small business owners, including farmers, and not everybody always recognises farmers as small businesses, but they are, and I know the hard work that the member for Barker is putting into his electorate to make sure that farmers have a voice in this place, to make sure that farmers get the very best representation, and that the work they do does not go unrecognised, Mr Speaker, in the South Australian electorate that he represents so very fiercely and so very well. Now, farmers and their way of life, there are many impacts by so many factors, and whether it's changes to market forces, the increase in the value of the dollar, the drops in the price of wool, grain, livestock and land, and we fortunately have seen the good times in recent times, not so much for the price of wheat at the moment, that would be better if it were a lot higher, but the effects to farmers and their families is detrimental, and that's why this legislation is so important. I've always valued the principle of giving someone a hand up rather than a handout, whether this be for the socially disadvantaged or those lacking in skills and knowledge or those struggling financially. It also, Mr Speaker, applies to farmers. Farmers aren't asking the government to give them a welfare handout, no they are not, but a hand up to help them out and support them with their basic household needs while they get their affairs in order in those tough times. As I mentioned before, fires, floods, droughts, all those sorts of things, and to make the necessary business decisions that they need to in order to get back on their feet and essentially to improve their long-term financial viability and situation. Now, the Farm Household Allowance is delivered by the Department of Human Services, and I commend the Minister for the work that he's done as well in this regard. It's paid fortnightly at a rate equivalent to New Start allowance or youth allowance for those under 22 years. Mr Speaker, a healthcare card is provided to recipients, and support is also provided through a dedicated case manager, and they are so important, Mr Speaker, to help recipients assess their situation and develop a plan for the future. And I know that this particular bill, the Coalition has fully consulted with key stakeholders, as the member for Gippsland mentioned before, the National Farmers Federation and others. The chairman, I know, Fiona Simpson is fully cognizant of what this bill entails. These amendments to the Farm Household Support Act have been introduced to clarify the definition of farm assets used in the running of farm businesses. They're complicated and complex matters, such as water assets and shares in a farming cooperative when assessing eligibility. The amendments address the issue of such assets necessary for the operation of the farm enterprise, falling within the definition of non-farm asset, which has stricter asset limits and can prevent some of the rightfully eligible farm businesses from receiving payments. Mr Speaker, changing the definition of assets means more farm businesses in my electorate of Riverina and the Central West will be eligible to receive assistance with farm assets such as water being treated in the same vein as other assets needed to run a farm business, including land and machinery. Before the Coalition introduced the Farm Household Allowance in 2014, Mr Speaker, there was no support payment generally available to farmers in hardship outside of the very worthwhile and very good and very necessary exceptional circumstances drought program, and it was abolished by the former Labor administration, which gave farmers, really hardship times, hard times. It left farmers on their own, Mr Speaker. Now, more than 7,000 claims have been granted nationally since the FHA was introduced, giving farmers access to one-on-one case support, as I mentioned, how crucially important is that, activity supplements and income support. I'm very pleased to stand here and support this amendment. I'm very glad it will ensure that recipients of the Farm Household Allowance are not required, once assessed as eligible, to serve a waiting period or liquid assets waiting period before they can start to receive the Farm Household Allowance. I'm hopeful, in fact I'm confident, that this amendment will make things easier for farmers and their families in my electorate, whether they're in Peak Hill or Mangapla, West Wyalong or Young. It's important that we as a government continue to stand up for the regions and those who live and work in them. And I'd just like to put on the record some of these statistics so far. As I mentioned, more than 7,000 claims. As at the 24th of February, Mr Speaker, in fact, it's 7,133 farmers and partners have received grants. Current number of recipients receiving payments as of the same date, 4,794 farmers and partners. Total payments made This period covers the 1st of March 2014 to the 31st of January this year, including the interim farm household allowance, $162.3 million, Mr Speaker. I would argue that's an investment. It's an investment in our future. It's an investment in our farmers, and therefore it's an investment in our regions. The amount of support over 3 years up to $74,474.40 for a couple, up to $41,238.60 for a single. These measures are part of the government's commitment to continuously improve delivery of the FHA to better meet the needs of farmers who can benefit from this form of assistance. And, you know, farmers can know with confidence that, Mr Speaker, that this coalition government recognises their worth, their importance, and acknowledges just what they do on behalf of this nation. New loan scheme to support farm businesses, that concessional loan scheme, supports farm businesses dealing with and recovering from drought. We've put that in place. The agricultural white paper. It's a $4 billion, Mr Speaker, investment in our farmers. We're helping farm businesses to achieve better farm gate returns, and we so often hear, and whilst he's mocked and knocked by those opposite in question time, the member for New England, the Minister for Agriculture and Water Resources, when he gets up and extols the virtues of the importance of grain, increased record prices of beef, of cotton, and of all the other commodities that he talks about so often in question time, I just wish sometimes those opposite, particularly those from the city electorates, I know the member for Eden Monero gets it, but particularly some of those opposite from city seats whose RM Williams, if they indeed wear them, have never seen a bit of farm dust, never seen a bit of bull dust. Talk a bit about it sometimes, Mr Speaker, but their boots have never seen it. Certainly they need to sometimes get out of the bubble that is this place and their city electorates and just understand and recognise the importance our farmers play, and give the Agriculture Minister a bit more credit when he gets to his feet and extols the virtues of the record prices that have been achieved in recent times. And I appreciate the member opposite nodding his head. He understands it. He appreciates it too. Growing markets. The fact that we have been able to broker trade agreements with Japan, with South Korea and with China, and that is so critically important. And I know that the Prime Minister met the Indonesian President on the weekend, and hopefully through the Trade Minister we will be able to broker a deal with our biggest neighbour very soon. And I know that the member for Moncrieff is also obviously in very detailed talks with India at the moment. That's ongoing. That's fantastic. So growing markets enable us to be able to sell our wares, our goods, our farm products even further afield. And the member for Gippsland, the Minister for Infrastructure and Transport, spoke about the importance of the $50 billion rollout of infrastructure, a record amount spent by the coalition government, by the Liberal and Nationals. And not just in city areas, Mr Speaker, also in regional electorates. And it's so important to get that those road networks, the inland rail built, and all those things that are going to be able to get our farmers' produce to markets quicker to help farmers. Now, we are removing technical barriers to trade. We're supporting innovative agriculture. I know the Prime Minister talks often about innovation. No better area to talk about innovation than in farming, and certainly our farmers are the most innovative in the world, Mr Speaker. They are the very best in the world at their craft, at what they do, and they always have been, they are at the moment, they always will be. We're providing a better tax system for farmers. I'm glad that the instant asset write-off is in. As the Small Business Minister, I know how important that is. Skills and labour, I'm glad we got the backpacker tax situation sorted. That was important. The wet rebate, that was important. We certainly helped the Australian Grape and Wine Authority promoting Australian wine overseas. They produce the finest wine in parts of the Riverina and the Murrumbidgee irrigation area I once represented very proudly. But Mr Speaker, getting back to this important bill, it is important. The Farm Household Support Amendment Bill of 2017 gives those salt-of-the-earth people who we know, we love, we respect. We want to continue for them to do what they do for our outstanding country. We want to understand and acknowledge the important contribution they make, and this bill does just that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the Minister for Small Business and Member for Riverina.